All right, here we go. SicEm365 Radio. Grayson Grunhafer, our recruiting analyst, was at Big 12 Media Days with us yesterday, along with Colt. They dropped by and was able to listen in on Dave Aranda, Galvin, and also Terrell Bernard, among others. He joins us on SicEm365 Radio. Grayson, anything in particular that popped out at you?
I mean, there were a lot of things. I think the overall, idea of kind of Dave Aranda just taking that next step as a head coach and as a face of this Baylor football program, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me from yesterday. I just feel like there's a confidence about him, there's a composure about him, and there's clearly a drive that he has. And I think that getting to see that kind of on that stage at Big 12 Media Days was really, really encouraging. And, hopefully Baylor fans were able to go listen to a lot of the content that we put up, and just also, just his press conference in general. I think there's clearly a change in him this year, and I think it has everything to do with confidence and everything to do with this isn't a COVID year, and it's not his first year being a head coach. So I was really, really impressed with what I heard from him, and obviously there were a lot of other takeaways from what he talked about, but I think just that cool, calm collectedness and also his confidence, I think were definitely the biggest things that stood out.
What did you think about what he said about the quarterbacks?
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I know I talked to Colt about this. I also talked to Craig about this. I felt like it was really good to hear him talk more so about the weaknesses than the positives. I think we all know kind of the things that these quarterbacks bring to the table. But I do believe that him talking about those little ways where they can improve are kind of the things that we've heard quite a bit. Now, I do believe at the end of the day, this is a two-horse race between Gary Bohannon and Jacob Zeno. But I also think it's really good that Blake Shapen has continued to improve and that there are areas where he's excelled at, but also areas they need to improve upon. So, yeah, and I think the things that he said about the quarterback specifically, Jacob Zeno improving his accuracy with the deep ball, I think that we actually saw that in the spring game. He had Tyquan Thornton open, missed him during the game. So I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. And obviously Gary Bohannon, it's just kind of the repetitions, it seems, with him, the ability to really understand the nuances of the offense and make those decisions quickly while also being able to go to your second and third options, being able to read options on the football field. That's key. And that's something that Zach Wilson did really, really well at BYU. And so that's an area that obviously Coach Aranda feels like he needs to work on. So I thought it was really good to hear that. I also think it means that this is still an open competition, and there's still going to be a ton of time where they're going to look at these quarterbacks and really evaluate them during fall camp. I know Dave Aranda mentioned in the breakout session that they would like to find their guy, as in they don't want to go into that Texas State game playing both guys, which I know a lot of people have kind of hinted at or talked about as a possibility. But it's clear he would much rather find that guy in fall camp. So we'll see if they're able to do it. It's going to be a really interesting race, I think, all the way up until the season begins.
So, Grayson, when you make a Twitter post or something, like sometimes the context and the way a person says something is not present. And so when he was talking about Gary, and I typed out what I could, everybody saw like, oh, well, so he basically has to work on everything. The quick passing game, the drop back, making reads, getting the ball out on time. And several people were like, oh, so he's not good at anything. And it's like, no, he's good. Like, it wasn't as negative as it sounded in regards to Gary. Agreed?
Yeah, I very much so agree. I think that if you really read it's really more so, okay, Gary Bohannon's always been in a shotgun offense pretty much and has been in a spread offense. You go watch his high school tape, he's almost always in shotgun. So it makes sense that he has to get better dropping back in the pass game. I mean, that makes total sense. If you're ever going to put him under center at all, yeah, he's going to have to work on that. But I would also say I think that's something that all of these quarterbacks are probably going to have to work on. So, yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the quick rhythm passing game, I mean, I believe we've talked about this ad nauseum about Gary, that is something he's going to have to improve upon. But if you look at it kind of from a positive sense, it means that, hey, Gary's got a strong arm. Gary is doing things really, really well in the passing game, it's just a matter of getting into a rhythm and also being able to find those other options. So I think there's positives that go to it. Obviously, he's a great runner. So, I mean, that doesn't even have to be mentioned. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think that the quote, when you read it, can sometimes be a little, oh, man, there's so much he needs to work on. But then on the other hand, if you look at the things that weren't mentioned, I think there's positives when you look into that a little bit as well.
So do you think Shapen legitimately is a part of that competition as a starter?
I really don't. I know he's listed as an or, and I know it's been a running competition for since the spring, and obviously he didn't play baseball, so he wanted to focus on the quarterback competition. But I just don't see it at this time. I think that they're going to go with Gary or Jacob, and whoever wins the job, I think will be the right guy for the job. And whether that means that's the best quarterback, or whether that means that's the guy that moves the offense the best, or whether that means they need to do it based on the situation they have. I just think they're going to pick the best guy, but I do think it will be between Gary Bohannon and Jacob Eason.
He was bullish on the DBs, Grayson, and with good reason. Is that the deepest position group in your mind?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the question, because they talked about LSU as DBU when they kind of brought it up, at least in the press conference. But, yeah, he mentioned the defensive backs, and that stood out to me, to be honest, because I do think if you're going to look at a position where they need to see growth outside of the defensive line, where they just need guys to stay healthy, you want to see those defensive backs grow. And that's J.T. Woods, Christian Morgan, Kalen Barnes. You need to see them take another step if you really want to have an elite secondary. But I think it's also good because he mentioned a lot of the guys, the depth guys, throughout the day as well. Chateau Reed was the name that was mentioned during his breakout session. I also think there's just a confidence with what they have depth-wise that I don't think we've really gotten to see a whole lot of. I know we saw it a little bit in the spring game, but I think it's very interesting that he's so excited about that secondary, because I wouldn't necessarily say that is the biggest strength when you look at this roster, just kind of going through the depth pieces of it. So I thought that was a big positive for sure.
Any impressions of what Terrell Bernard was talking about throughout the day, or anything that you glossed off Terrell Bernard? When we talked to him, he was clearly in a pretty good place, seems fired up for the season, was very complimentary of Aranda. What about on your end?
Yeah, I think he's another one who kind of instilled that confidence level. He's very confident in what they're going to do defensively. He talked about Dave Aranda, the relationship that they have, him being a big part of the reason they decided to come back to Baylor. I think he's healthy. He mentioned that a few times. He feels really healthy, ready to go for fall ball after not really doing a whole lot during the spring as far as physical contact. So now he's going to be ramping that up a bit come fall, and I'm excited to see what he does. I think based on what I heard and what I've seen from him, I think this could be a massive year for Terrell Bernard. I think he's got all the confidence in the world. I know Dave Aranda mentioned how, Terrell played really well last year, but he was just kind of going out there thinking. There was still a lot of thinking because he didn't really know the full defensive scheme still. And this goes for everyone on the defensive side, but he was able to make up for it just with his natural football instinct. But Aranda mentioned the fact that he thinks he's going to take a huge step in, kind of being able to read offenses and especially be able to play effective defense within the scheme. And I think if he's able to do that, he could take another just huge step forward. We've seen Dave Aranda do great things with linebackers in the past, and Terrell Bernard's a very talented one. And I think that just kind of confidence and his ability to be comfortable in this defense, even more so than last year, I mean, that's a scary sight, guys, because he was very, very effective when he was on the field a year ago.
I'm one of those that tries to believe in people, and I'm probably naive at times in ways when it comes to hoping somebody is going to be, example, the offensive line better. There's no reason for me to think that they will be other than the fact you have a new offensive line coach, an offensive coordinator who played it, and then, of course, there's more people on the line, including Jacob Gall, among others. I know there's a difference between talk and actually getting it done, but Grayson, convince me why, other than the fact that last year they weren't very good at all, that the offensive line is going to be better? Because Connor Galvin, you could tell it kind of ruffled him a little bit when we talked about maybe getting sand kicked in his face.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you, just as far as convincing you, I do think the talent is better. And I think that's the first place I believe you need to start. When you talk about bringing in Jacob Gall, a guy who was a PFF All-American, a guy who played really, really well at Buffalo, I know that's a group of 5 school, but I think he's going to bring another dimension to that center position. And Baylor really has struggled at the center position, in my opinion, for some time now. I know Tecklenburg played well at times, but even for him, I mean, it was a huge adjustment playing the center position. It took a lot of time. But I think Jacob Gall gives them a ton of confidence there and kind of leadership as well at the center position. So I think that position is going to take care of itself. I feel really good about Connor Galvin as well. I think that he's going to have a huge season. I predicted him to be a preseason All-Big 12 player as far as how I think he'll end up. And so, I mean, that's a huge compliment as well. So the other 3 positions, though, I think are up in the air. I do like the addition of Grant Miller, the Vanderbilt transfer. I think he could come in and play a substantial role. He brings talent as well. But the other 2 positions, I think, are going to be very interesting. I like the talent that Baylor has at tackle with Casey Phillips and Gavin Byers, but I don't think we've seen Casey really do it enough at the tackle position. I'm a little nervous to see, kind of what he can bring to the table, but I know injuries have plagued his career a little bit up to this point. So hopefully he's healthy and really making an impact as well. And as far as the other guard position, I think it's really encouraging that you have Giancarlo Valentin, a guy who has played football for a long time, a senior, a super senior, a guy who can, I think, really take that step to the next level and maybe compete, maybe get a starting job. Xavier Newman has played a ton of football. Can he take a step and fill in that other guard position, or will a guy like Mose Jeffrey be able to take over that role? I think the good news, though, Smokey, is the fact that these guys that I'm naming, I don't think are all just another guy. I think a lot of these guys really have a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and I think that Eric Mateos is going to get the best out of them. And so, yeah, up to this point, they really haven't shown a lot, but I think Mateos can take them to another level. And when you're an older guy, the ability to get better sometimes comes really quickly with a change in scheme or just a change in philosophy and coaching. And I think there's a chance that Eric Mateos could really instill that and do wonders for this group.
I get the impression talking to Mateos that he said it's not a talent issue, it's a getting it issue, or it's a commitment issue, or certain things that they just gotta understand. And for some, the clock is ticking. Grayson, we're going to give you a week off with recruiting information. Don't ever expect that to happen again. We'll give you a week off of discussing anything like that, but we expect at least a couple more news from you over the weekend or next week. Is there anything imminent at all, or it pretty much a dying kind of? Well, I know that Patton and a couple others might commit in the next week or two, right?
Yeah, July 31st is the date to circle. That's when Jeremy Patton and Derek Brown will be making their commitment decisions. Of course, that comes one day after Texas's pool party, which both of them will be at.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But, yeah, that's the most imminent. I know there's still some guys that Baylor still has their eye on. Cedric Roberts and Calvin Dinkins both got Indiana offers this past week. I know Baylor's still kind of in the running there. We'll see what happens on that end. But, yeah, as far as imminent, I think those are kind of the 4 names to keep an eye on specifically at this time.
Would you disagree with me if I said I don't expect Brown or Patton to be Baylor?
I think that I truly think that it's a toss-up at this time. So if you wanted to tell me Texas, that's fine, but I do think Baylor is right there, especially for Patton. I think Patton is the one who I think Baylor, they've recruited him so long and so hard. I find it hard to believe that they're out of it currently. Derek Brown's a little bit different. I think that's going to be an interesting one all the way up until he makes a decision. But they're in it. They're absolutely in it for both.
That's just me off the cuff. No one's told me that. Thanks for your time. Grayson Grunhafer, Fridays at 3:45. He was in Arlington with us, along with so many others, SicEm365 and our recruiting analyst. When we come back, a couple of notes. The NFL